Veterans often ask, can I have more than one VA loan at the same time? Though the answer might be yes, it's important to differentiate between some closely related yet distinctly different questions that are not identical. Because if you ask the wrong question, you'll end up with the wrong conclusion. Can I use my VA loan more than once is not the same question as can I have more than one VA loan at the same time? And it's also not the same question as can I obtain more than one VA loan at the same time? So those are three different questions, and in this video, we'll set about to answer each one. Can I use my VA loan more than once? Simple answer is yes. Your VA home loan benefit is not one and done. Your certificate of eligibility never expires. Once eligible, there's no end date on your eligibility. Veterans aged over 90 have been known to use their VA home loan benefit to purchase a home. And there are veterans who've used their entitlement over 10 to 15 times in their lifetime. Now, let's add a little caveat though. Each time you want to obtain a VA loan, you must have sufficient entitlement for the transaction you're pursuing. More on this later. So the answer is yes, you can use it more than once, but each time you do, you must have sufficient entitlement. A different question is, can I have two VA loans at the same time? Notice this is not the same question we just answered. The key word is have. The answer here again is yes. You can have two or even more VA loans at the same time. More later on how a veteran could have arrived at such a situation. But for now, here's a third and very different question. Can I obtain more than one VA loan at the same time? In other words, at the same time, can I get a VA loan on one property and another VA loan on a different property? A VA loan to purchase a property can only be obtained if you intend on occupying that property. So the answer is no, you cannot obtain VA loans on two different homes at any given time. This is because the veteran would need to certify occupancy at both places, and that simply isn't feasible. Even if a veteran said, I'm going to live in this home in this particular town, and then very shortly afterwards claimed her circumstances had changed and she wanted to move into a home in a whole different location using VA loans for both, VA would take issue with that, and so would any lending underwriter. However, you can finance two different homes at the same time with each having its own VA loan if one of those transactions involves refinancing. Here's how it works. Let's say you have a home that you used to live in but have since turned into a rental property. The VA allows you to refinance the VA loan on this property into a lower interest rate using the IRRRL program, even if you don't currently live in it. This means you could find yourself in the middle of two separate transactions at the same time, involving different properties when you purchase a home and refinance an existing rental home at the same time. It's important to note that an IRRRL refinance is not the same as a VA cash-out refinance. With an IRRRL refinance, you're not taking any money out of the equity in the home as you would in a cash-out refinance. An IRRRL refinance always uses the same amount of entitlement that was originally used, even though the guarantee is often larger. So we've asked three distinctly different questions and answered them. Let's dive a little deeper into the how. Whenever we talk about having more than one VA loan, the key issue that needs to be addressed is entitlement. What is that, you ask? VA entitlement is the amount of money the VA guarantees to the lender in case a veteran defaults. If you're pursuing a second VA loan, the VA underwriter looks at what you intend to do with the first one. To obtain a second VA loan, there are 5 paths you can take. Some of these depend on what you do with the first VA loan and others do not. 1. Obtain the next VA loan using a restoration of basic entitlement. This means selling your home and paying off the VA loan that's on it, resulting in your full entitlement being restored, ready for the next VA loan. Your basic entitlement can be restored over and over with each sale and subsequent purchase of a home. 2. Obtain the next VA loan using a one-time restoration. We have a whole video on this great topic, but for here and now, suffice it to say that one time only, you get to pay off the VA loan you have, but keep the home rather than selling it. Your full entitlement is restored, ready for the next VA loan. As you'll see later, the VA will only allow you to do this maneuver once. 3. Obtain the next VA loan using remaining entitlement. For this to happen, your next loan would need to be at least $144,001, and if you have sufficient entitlement left over, you could keep your existing VA loan and home intact. You could then use whatever entitlement you have remaining to purchase the next home with even zero down payment. The actual numbers here will be driven by the county loan limit where you buy. Why? Because the county loan limit determines the max VA entitlement available. From that maximum, we would deduct how much you've used to arrive at the net entitlement remaining. County loan limits change almost every year. Please check the VA website for what it is right now. For the purpose of making it easy to understand, let's say the county conforming loan limit is $888,888. It has never been that number and most likely never will. This is just for illustration purposes using simple math. How much total entitlement is available to the veteran in that county? Since entitlement is 25%, the entitlement available is $222,222. Say veteran Kelly purchased a home in Wyoming for $200,000 and therefore used up $50,000 in entitlement. She wants to keep that home and leave the VA loan on it intact as she moves to Georgia a couple of years later. What can she buy in Georgia? She has $222,222 minus $50,000 equals $172,222 in entitlement left over. This is also known as her remaining entitlement, by the way. Since the VA will guarantee up to 4 times the entitlement, she can purchase a home for 4 times $172,222 equals $688,888 without a down payment in Georgia. Once she's closed on that home, she's used up all her available entitlement. Now, wait just a minute. What if she bought a home for $300,000 instead? She'd use 25% of $300,000 equals $75,000 of her remaining entitlement, which when added to the $50,000 she has tied up in Wyoming, means she would have used up $125,000 in total entitlement. Could she get a third VA loan? Technically, yes, if she can and will occupy the third home. Say a couple of years after her Georgia home purchase, she relocates to Texas. If she wishes to, she could turn her Georgia home into a rental and leave the VA loan on it intact. Would she need to sell it? Not necessarily. Depends on how much home she wants to buy in Texas. Leaving Georgia, Kelly arrives in Plano, Texas and finds a nice home for $400,000. It would require $100,000 in remaining entitlement for her to pull off a zero down purchase because, as we said earlier, the VA guarantee is 25%. If the total overall entitlement for any veteran is $222,222 based on an $888,888 imaginary limit, and Kelly has used up $125,000 between her Wyoming and Georgia VA loans, she's got $97,222 remaining. Since VA will guarantee up to 4 times the entitlement, she can borrow 4 times $97,222 equals $388,888. Unfortunately, that doesn't get her to $400,000. Does she have to put down the difference of $11,112 all in cash? Actually, no, even though she could if she chose to. Since VA will guarantee 25% of the loan amount, Kelly can put down 25% of the $11,112 difference in cash and borrow the rest. So her total required down payment on the $400,000 home purchase is $2,778, and her new VA loan amount is $397,222. On 3 separate occasions, in 3 different locations, over time, Kelly has used her VA loan entitlement to purchase a home to live in. Once again, please note the $888,888 figure was a make-believe number for the county conforming loan limit, which is set each year by the Federal Housing Finance Agency. Be sure to check the VA website for the present-day county conforming loan limit. 4. Obtain the next VA loan together with a spouse who also has VA entitlement. Dual military couples each have their respective VA benefit amounts. If you as a veteran have capped out on your entitlement but your spouse hasn't even used his or hers, for example, then you could borrow with your spouse on the next VA loan using some or all of his or her entitlement without using any of yours. Furthermore, if you or your spouse are receiving VA disability compensation, it's a good idea to use a portion of entitlement from the person receiving VA disability and the remaining amount from the other spouse. This approach cuts the VA funding fee in half because the spouse receiving VA compensation is exempt from paying the funding fee. 5. Obtain the next VA loan together with another veteran who is not your spouse. This is considered a joint VA loan and covered in another module in our series. By splitting entitlements, you could potentially keep your present VA loan and borrow together with the other veteran on the next VA loan. There are 3 other scenarios that are worth mentioning. in our discussion about veterans who take out a VA loan and then proceed to obtain a second one, either shortly afterwards or even many years later. 6. Say a veteran took out a VA loan that he ended up defaulting, resulting in the VA taking a loss. Then a certain amount of his entitlement would have been lost. In some cases, so much entitlement was lost there's not enough left over to buy much of anything. But in many cases, surprisingly, even with the loss of entitlement, there's enough left to buy the next home, i.e. take out a second VA loan without paying back what VA lost on the first one. More on this in another module in our series. 7. If a veteran took out a VA loan, then allowed another veteran to assume that VA loan by substituting her entitlement for the incoming veteran that's purchasing the home, then full basic entitlement could be restored to go purchase the next home with a second VA loan. 8. If a veteran took out a VA loan, then allowed a civilian to assume that VA loan when selling the home, that veteran would be leaving his entitlement tied up in the property he sold. This is somewhat of a dangerous situation for the veteran and is covered in another module in our series. For now, let's just say the veteran who sold his home in this way could potentially use what remaining second-tier entitlement he has left to get a second VA loan to purchase the next home. From what we've shared here, it will be clear to you as a veteran that obtaining more than one VA loan should be done strategically while taking into consideration that there might be a few different ways of structuring the deal. In any given case, one approach may have advantages over another. We strongly encourage you to strategize with your VA loan educator as you make your decision.